Hey everyone, welcome. This is Forensics Talks, and we're at episode 101 and moving ahead here in the hundreds, which is wonderful. Today, my guest is going to be Clark Davenport, and he's a forensic geophysicist, and he's also going to be talking to us about NecroSearch. And so, before we begin, though, I just want to do some of the basic things that I typically do, and that is if you want to participate in the discussion, you definitely can. You can do a few things. So one is please introduce yourself into the comments. So if you're watching through YouTube or LinkedIn, there's a comment section. Just go ahead, type in, say hello. Most importantly, I like to know where people are from. So if you're watching from overseas or a different country, super interesting for me. I always like to see that. So type in the city or the country that you're watching from. Questions or comments, add them into the chat window. What I'll do as we're speaking, I'll be looking over every now and then, and I'll be hoping to vet some of those questions and see if I can present some of the questions that you have to our guest. And also, if you like the video and you like the topic, go ahead and just hit the like and subscribe button. Typically, the usual thing that people tell you and that I always forget to say, but I'm going to start saying it more. I guess the subscribe thing is helpful on YouTube for spreading the word. Other than that, there is a Recon 3D training course. So a lot of you know that I have the app, the Recon 3D course, that there's one that is coming up on June 11th. So June 11th, there's a course from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you're interested in using your iPhone LiDAR as a scanner, then we have a training course for that. You can find more on the Recon 3D website. And I can already see people chiming in here. So, hey, Minnesota, nice to see you there. And we'll little by little, we'll see what some other people have to say. Okay, so I'm going to just get in here, and we're going to get started right away. So first off, so my guest is Mr. Clark Davenport. He's a forensic geophysicist and a pioneering figure in geoforensics and remote sensing. He's got a career that's spanning over 55 years, and he's managed and executed remote sensing surveys for criminal, environmental, groundwater, geotechnical, mining, and archaeological investigations across 6 continents. He co-founded NecroSearch International, something that is going to be the main subject for today. And it involves having a multidisciplinary team dedicated to assisting law enforcement in locating clandestine graves and evidence. And since 1987, Clark has led the integration of remote sensing technologies into criminal investigations, contributing to over 100 cases across 32 states and 7 countries. And his expertise is sought by many different organizations, including the FBI, the U.S. Secret Service, the DEA, the ATF, and various international police agencies. His instructional roles at institutions like the Colorado Law Enforcement Training Academy and the FBI Academy highlight his commitment to education and forensic science. And Clark is also a decorated Vietnam combat veteran. So he holds a degree in geophysical engineering from the Colorado School of Mines and an associate degree in criminal justice from Red Rocks Community. He's got extensive experience, and I've met him only recently, but I've enjoyed his company a lot. And let me bring him in here so we can get going. There he is. Hey, Clark. How are you?
Hi, Gene. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time and spending get you for about an hour.
You got through that without saying A.
Yeah, the Canadian A. I try to avoid that, but I do a lot of like hums and ahs and that sort of thing. So hopefully I won't do too many of those. So we'll see. But hey, I guess we have to thank Thilo Voitel for putting us together. Yeah, I guess he's a joint friend. So Thilo, if you're out there watching, thanks very much for connecting us. So yeah, Clark, you are located. Where are you? Where are you speaking from today?
I'm speaking from Lakewood, Colorado. It's about 15 miles west of Denver. It's been home.
That's where you're originally from, or?
No. I was raised in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, and very, very western North Carolina.
Very western North Carolina. Okay.
I came out here in 1959, and other than some years overseas, I've pretty much lived here the whole time.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you about, your beginnings and, being a geophysicist, but even before that. So, I mean, some of the work that you're doing in forensics, if you were to wind the clock back to when you were, just a kid or whatever, were you always like a science kid? You were into like technical stuff, or like what kind of a kid were you?
Yeah, I was a curious kid. I got very interested in geology. My my cousin by marriage was a Canadian geologist, head of the Nova Scotian Geological Survey. And he'd come by the house and show me his little notebooks with the drawings. And that really intrigued me. So I decided in high school, we had a choice of taking biology or geology. I took geology.
Oh,
And
okay.
that led to wanting to go to the Colorado School of Mines. Kind of a legacy thing. My uncle, my dad's brother, graduated in there 1911. So I was a number of years after that for me.
Yeah, you're old, but you're not that old,
That's correct.
right?
Not a senior citizen, a seasoned citizen.
Right, exactly. Well, so was it? I mean, the geographically though, because you were in the Colorado area, there's a significant amount of work there for a geophysicist?
No, I travel around the world doing primarily. I worked in oil and gas for 3 years, and I did not enjoy that. I enjoyed field work, so I went to work for a couple of major consulting firms on large projects, siting for nuclear power plants, bridges, roads, and that took me really around the world, which short-term assignments up to 3, 4, 5 months.
Okay. So there was a few things that came up, like when I was reading your, sort of your CV and your background. There's sort of like remote sensing, there's geophysics, there's this surveying aspect to what you're doing as well. So maybe let's start with the physics part, the geophysics part. So what just for people who don't know or maybe are not familiar with that profession, what can you tell me about that?
I like to joke that geophysics is nothing more than geology with math. Um, That's basically what it is. It's the idea of remote sensing, looking at the Earth, trying to determine what's within the Earth. For example, you're looking for oil. There's type of surveys you do for that at depths of thousands of feet. If you're looking for contamination in environmental studies, you're probably looking less than 300 feet deep. They all have different types of instrumentation that you can run. You get numbers, you plot them, you make maps, and you hope that you can make decisions on how to clean it up afterwards.
And was surveying a big part of the like sort of your learning or your training
Yes,
as well?
absolutely. The Colorado School of Mines, you had to take a 6-week surveying course, which was during the summer. So it was 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. And that was nice to have because it was always something you could fall back on. If if you could get a job in oil and gas or something, you could always hold a surveying rod. But
So
anything you do in remote sensing, you have to know where you are at any given time, and that involves surveying.
okay, so you graduated around what year, or when did you start working? That was around what time frame?
I worked a couple of years when I was in school, but I graduated in 1964. That actually crammed 4 years into 5, very conveniently. Then went into oil and gas for a year. Took military leave, or was asked to take military leave for 2 years. Did active duty, and then came back to the States and went into engineering. Pretty much, I didn't want to go back to oil and gas. They had to give me the job, and I used that platform to find other work with major companies, but one was based here in Denver. Worked a couple of years just doing the site surveys, and then I had some trouble adjusting. Being back from I was in Vietnam for a year, had trouble adjusting, and took the family to Spain for 3 years. Worked for a Spanish engineering company.
Oh wow!
Then we came back here.
Where were you in Spain?
We lived in Madrid. I worked all over North Africa, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Korea, South Africa, just all projects all over the place.
Yeah, amazing.
It's quite a life. It's been a great life. I still continue to travel. And one of my investigations now is I've been working summers for 8 years in Russia, working looking for a murder victim. We can talk about that later.
Oh wow, amazing. Well, let's start creeping into the whole NecroSearch thing.
Mhm.
So, at some point along your career, you must have did you already meet some people? Did you have this idea, or what triggered
No.
this whole forensics thing
Well,
for you?
I was working out on a site looking for 55 gallons that supposedly contained chemicals, and they were 6 to 10 feet deep. And on the news one evening, I saw police officers doing the same thing with a metal detector, looking for 55-gallon drums that supposedly had bodies in them, 6 to 10, 12 feet deep. I told my son, who at that point I think was a senior in high school, those guys are crazy. You can't detect anything that deep with a standard metal detector. And his threat to me, he's now a lawyer, was, "Oh, Dad, why don't you do something about that?" So the next morning, I made a career-ending decision. I called the police station and said, "Hey, I didn't want to explain remote sensing. I just said I have some information on those bodies." That has led to something like 37 years of fascinating work. Absolutely fascinating.
Amazing. So you got
And
involved. They called you back.
yes, they called. I got involved in the investigation. We did in fact find some barrels that deep, and that led to being asked by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to give a talk to some of the agents about, hey, what are these things you're doing? And then that led to being asked by the FBI to come to New York and give a same sort of thing. What are you doing? And yeah, this is kind of new to us. And that led to a basically meeting some individuals that were struggling. There's three policemen, three investigators or detectives struggling with the idea there's got to be a better way to find the remains of murder victims' clandestine graves. And we had a breakfast at Denny's, myself, a colleague who's a geologist, and three police officers, and came up with an idea. Well, why don't we bury something and see what the changes are? In Colorado, even though now we have legalized marijuana, at the time we didn't. Didn't, and using human remains is a different issue. We just decided we had been given, I guess, about 10 acres by a couple of the sheriff's office, and we buried three pigs. Pigs are similar in weight, organs, and so forth. We buried them at different depths, and again, I figured 2 weeks later we'll come back and see what the changes are, and off we go. Uh, People here in Colorado thought that was when they found out, they thought it was a cult activity, and it wasn't hard to convince them that have to pardon this, that the pigs were victims of homicides. Yes. Uh, we went back a couple of weeks later, and there were some pretty major changes. Like one of the pigs was totally missing. Uh, you find all kinds of animal tracks around the grave. That has led to forming an organization we originally called Project Pig, including every time we would do something, we'd come up with questions, and then one of us would say, "Well, I know somebody can help us." That morphed into, in 1987 or 1988, into NecroSearch International. Went through the IRS at 501c3. And currently, we have about 50 members scattered throughout the U.S., although a majority of them are here. We have very close ties with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We have 17 or 18 different disciplines, cadaver dog handlers, geophysics, soils people, chemists, drone operators. And the interesting thing about NecroSearch, I find, and I'm very pleased that it's this way, is we don't charge for what we do. We've done close to 400 investigations, again, 7 foreign countries. We only charge expenses. And our goal, what I say, is that there's no statute of limitations on murder, at least in the U.S., nor are there statute of limitations on grief. If we can help people come to closure, that's a huge reward. And I think that my feeling from that comes from my time overseas in Vietnam, seeing what people are capable of doing to people. Um, it's an eclectic group. We have young people, we have older senior citizens, seasoned citizens. We have people that have, everybody is a volunteer. We meet once a week. Once a month. Our meetings talk about cases and what we can do to help. We have a protocol. We only respond to requests from law enforcement agencies. And there's a reason for that. If you call, your brother's missing, and you want help, we can't help you unless you go through a law enforcement agency, or if there's an individual in NecroSearch that thinks they can help you, they can ask permission to do it from the board of directors. And as long as there's no association with NecroSearch, yes, you can go ahead and help. We've done some of those as training. For example, sometimes we'll go out and there'll be a community that wants to know, they have a cemetery. Can you find out in this area of the cemetery, are there perhaps any graves? So that, I mean, we want to expand the cemetery, and we'll do that as a training program, not charging anything.
Okay. Let me back up a bit, because you mentioned something, and I have a couple of questions for what you just said. So the first one is, you got 10 acres of land. So how did they decide to just give you like 10 acres? Like, who's going to give you 10 acres of land these days, like, to do work? That's amazing. So what happened there?
It's a joint operation between two sheriff's districts, the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office and the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. They have a law enforcement training facility in south of Denver. It has firing ranges. It has a kill house, and we're just part of it. We use our section for research. We bury pigs and other things. One of the things that you can, there are body farms now. There've been a body farm in Tennessee for a long time. There's a couple others, one in Colorado. We don't deal with human remains. And specifically, if you're dealing with human remains, people donate their bodies, it has to be in a secure environment. You want to look at decomposition, how clothing changes and so forth, and that's great. We're more interested in scavenging. And if you're looking for animals to scavenge, you don't want to be in a secure, fenced-in environment. Just leave it open. We've gone through attaching small transmitters to different parts of pigs. Let coyotes, bobcats, raccoons, other predators carry these things off, and it's been fascinating. One of the things we've learned is, wow, what role do birds play in finding clandestine graves? And if you know scavenging patterns from birds in an area, birds build nests out of hairs and fibers, and hair on human remains lasts a long time. So we're learning as we go. We published a number of things, and and we share what we do with others, even law enforcement agencies and others that are doing research. And I'm passionate about it.
Yeah. Well, you're a co-founder, but there were other founders, that mean other
Absolutely.
co-founders.
Yeah.
So were these what was the first meeting about? Who came up with the, were you guys I don't know, having a coffee and somebody said, we should start NecroSearch or something? How did that happen?
Well, NecroSearch, no, it's
Project Pig.
We started with the three detectives, myself and a geologist. Of that now, let's see, two of the detectives have passed away. Griff and the geologist. Griff is with NecroSearch now. He's a founder. Myself and the geologist is still alive, but not part of NecroSearch, and that's his choice. The idea that I didn't like the name Project Pig. I mean,
hey, you muted yourself by accident. Just unmute there. Oh, hey, Clark, you muted yourself by accident.
It wasn't an accident. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I didn't like the name, the professional presentation of the name Project Pig. And at the time, I was working in Italy, and I came home. I'd been working on a necropolis. Necropolis is necro, death, acropolis, city. A necropolis is a cemetery. That's where I've been working. And with my son, we came up with the name NecroSearch, and that's what we just. It had a good sound to it. Uh, and that's what we went ahead and got our 501c3 using that name, NecroSearch International.
Yeah, when you said Griff, that's Griffin. So
Tom
he's
Griffin, right?
Tom Griffin. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's. I know I've seen him at conferences. Actually, I saw a presentation that he did on NecroSearch. I think it was, boy, back in 20. I'm going to say it was like 2017 or something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah,
And I
he's
think it was.
very, very well known. He's a
Yeah.
blood spatter expert.
Yes.
He works for a private consulting firm, but still is a member, a very active member of NecroSearch.
Yeah.
The former deputy director of Colorado Investigation is a member of NecroSearch. Um,
What?
we've got some interesting people.
Right. So you have, like you said, you have all these different disciplines, and if you go on the website, you list all kinds of different things that you
Right.
do, things like hydrology and the clandestine grave excavation and just a whole bunch of different things. So, um, what kinds of technologies do you have access to? Like not only the people, but what kinds of technology are typically used when you're doing a search?
Right. We have, as far as instrumentation goes, we have our own scan sonar, ground penetrating radar systems, electromagnetic systems, metal detectors, anything that you would typically use on a, let's say, a treasure hunt that can be modified to look for disturbances that might contain human remains. Uh, the way we approach sites is non-invasive to invasive. In other words, first thing we try to do is build a search footprint, and that might involve using aerial photographs. If we can find existing aerial photographs that were taken before a suspected disposal and after. One of our people is a very, very skilled computer person, and he's developed a technique of taking different photos, doing all kinds of processing and subtracting them so that the difference is what has changed in the interval between the photos. And that's been a tremendous help. That's non invasive. Once that technique is used to develop an area, then we can use cadaver dogs. We can send in botanists that look at all kinds of vegetation, soils people, um, hydrologists if we're involved with water, creeks, and so forth, uh, set flows in groundwater. Uh, and then you get all the way up to technology such as LIDAR or ground penetrating radar.
Okay. Are drones something that you're using? Like I know a lot of these drones have thermal, they've got
Yes.
multispectral, they got all this sort of thing. And there's actually a question from somebody here asking about, whether or not the decomposition of the organic matter in a grave, let's say, or something like that, if it creates some kind of depression or disturbance that can be detected easily.
Right. Usually, by the time we get to a case, any decomposition is well past. Our cases are typically anywhere from 3 to, I don't know, 100 years old. Um, yes, though, a drone with infrared. Law enforcement uses FLIR, forward looking infrared, to develop heat signatures, to look at different things. We use the same technology to look at the ground because if you disturb the ground, that heat signature eventually will be different than the surrounding undisturbed ground. Now, what does that mean? It could be that a tree was uprooted and you've got the cast of the roots and everything that are there. It could also be that somebody was buried or disposed of in an area, and just by the fact that that ground is typically looser than other areas, that heat signature given off may be detectable. Just the heat, once the sun goes down, that area is heated up, releases heat. We can map things like that.
Amazing. Um, I wanted to ask you about the process of, when you're first contacted maybe by a law
Mhm.
enforcement agency, and
Right.
then, how that leads all the way up to you guys bringing a team of people together and then getting out on a site or like doing searches and stuff like that. What's that process like?
The process, the protocol we use is that if we're contacted by a law enforcement agency, we will talk to them about what they have, and we will provide them with a questionnaire. It's usually a 2.5 page questionnaire. The questions are asked to do two things: to make sure that they've done everything they can before they start to rely on us. In other words, have they done their homework? Because we don't want to do their work for them, but we're happy to extend what they don't have in the way of techniques. Questionnaire is presented to the membership. The answers are the requesting law enforcement agency is invited to give a presentation to us. We've had presentations from people that have come to our meetings, again, once a month. We've had people from Australia come in and give presentations, but now we're doing it virtually. Give a presentation to our members that are there and online, and that just like this, we'll develop questions, and then we determine, can we help them and how can we help them. We will come up with a budget. And that budget would just include things like, you've got to get us there, 2 or 3 of us, maybe more. And if we're going to be there for 3 or 4 days, we need to be fed and housed. That's basically the only the travel expenses. That's the only expenses that typically are incurred. Anything above and beyond that, we don't do anything until the agency gives an approval. Sometimes NECMEC will help with the expenses if we're looking for a child under the age of 18 and they have a file or they have asked us. But it's a fairly rigid thing. I mean, we're glad to help. We just want to make sure that we're not wasting the agency's time nor our time.
Okay. What is the scale of some of these search areas that you have to deal with? I mean, are we talking about it's going to be, I don't know, 20 square miles? Are we talking like how big of an area are you given to like, hey, go out and look for stuff? Is it very specific?
That's why we get into the air photos and working with the law enforcement agency. They can share things with us, timelines and maybe confessions. In fact, I've just worked on some confessions now with one of our members is a forensic psychologist. They can look at confessions and determine quite a bit from that, or actually interview the person. No, you get into areas that large, it has to be narrowed down. You don't want to spend a lot of time, and I think we're very good at narrowing areas down. We look at things like, how did they get in there? If there's an area of suspected disposal, did they carry the body in? Did they use a vehicle? And if they used a vehicle, what is the access? What is the egress? All that type of stuff. We do a lot of work before we go to the field. We don't just show up with magic wands. No.
I'm thinking in my head about land, like you're excavating on land. But have you done work with water? I mean, bodies. Okay.
Absolutely. Found a car in the Missouri River. This is for the DEA. No, it was for the ATF. It had been there 7 years. They had a general area they thought the car might be. And we spent 2 days on the river surveying. But prior to that, we worked with the manufacturer of the vehicle. We knew what year it was. Did it have air conditioning when it came out? Or the reason we asked questions like that was it was done. The disappearance was on an August evening in Missouri. It's probably pretty hot. Okay. Did the car have air conditioning? Maybe the windows were up, or were the windows down? If the windows were down, how long would the car float? A lot of questions like this. How deep is the channel? Was it a self-scouring channel or not? Working with the Corps of Engineers. We put all this information together, went out, spent 2 days on the river with a magnetometer because we knew the mass of metal in the motor, and came up with 3 anomalous areas that fit what we modeled on a response. And the dive team, we briefed the dive team, and the first anomaly They dove on, they pulled up the license plate. That was the one they were looking for. They eventually got the vehicle out, and there was a body in the trunk of the vehicle.
Amazing.
So yeah, we work in water, we work on land, we work in swamps. We even worked in New Jersey, in a chemical lagoon. I mean, that wasn't really pleasant. And the question you get in there: what are the chemicals in that lagoon, and what effect would they have on a body? We worked on another section of the Missouri River where bodies were dismembered, 2 bodies in particular, and put in the river. We knew about where they went in the river. We had the requesting agency dismember some pigs and put some transmitters on them. And over a period of time, they went out and looked at where those body parts went, and that helped on a search footprint. So yeah, we try different things.
Okay. A lot of people that know me know that I do a lot of work with like 3D scanning and photogrammetry,
Right.
and I've got this Recon 3D app and stuff like that. But I'm curious about your take on ground penetrating radar. And the reason is I've seen over the years, I've seen presentations on this at conferences and things like that. And it's been hit and miss. So people have, shown where they've buried pigs and things like that. And then you got to go find it a year later or something like that. And, that they're digging up tree roots or whatever, or they miss it. Sometimes they get it. So what's your experience with GPR?
Well, I've been working with GPR since the early 1980s. And I don't pretend to be an expert. But when people call and say, we want GPR, first I want to know why. And I want to know what we're looking for. And there's a lot of questions. But I'll tell them there's good news and there's bad news. And they say, well, okay, what's the bad news? The bad news is you're going to find anomalies. Well, then what's the good news? You're going to find anomalies. We don't know what those are. It's just a disturbance in the ground. Then we have to get into looking at the shape of the disturbance, the depth of the disturbance. If you're looking for a child and your disturbance is 18 feet long, that's not going to be a high priority. If you're looking for an adult remains and your disturbance is 3 feet long, that's probably a low priority. I will state again and again, ground penetrating radar will not find bodies. Will not find bodies.
Really?
Regardless.
Interesting.
You can find them in a laboratory in a controlled setting, but not in the field. What you will find are disturbances. And then you have to get into looking at the characteristics of the disturbances, what you can see, and prioritize those. For example, we had a case in Florida in 1994. And as far as I know, it's the first, maybe the second case of ground penetrating radar being used in court, the results of the ground penetrating radar. All I knew from the radar were we had 3 anomalies in this backyard. I prioritized them, but we also knew that one of those anomalies there was a reason. Well, in fact, there was a reason for 2 of them. Construction reason. So the one that didn't have any reason to exist, the anomaly, turned out to be the remains of a woman, and this is all concreted. She'd been under that concrete for 28 years. Now, I didn't know she was there. All I could say was there's an anomaly, and that's what happens when you go to court. There is people ask for words to use in a warrant all the time, law enforcement, and I use that case because the conviction did stand up with the Arizona, it's the equivalent of the Superior Court, the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
The husband was still alive, had remarried. Anyways, that was a very interesting case.
Interesting. So what kind of, is it just because the GPR is very sensitive to soil content and
absolutely
moisture, things like that?
Moisture, clay. I've run ground penetrating radar in Mexico City looking for archaeological stuff, and I get a penetration of less than a meter because Mexico City is in a giant clay basin. The other thing is being asked to run it in a canal, a clay line canal, looking for leaks in the canal. And I said, sure, we can do that. And I said, well, somebody said, wait a minute, you can't use radar in a clay environment. I said, absolutely. But if there's a leak, the clay's gone. So, it's negative information, but the kind they want. It's a dangerous tool. It really is. And then you get to now we're seeing that instrumentation has become so easy to use that we can send out technicians that don't understand what they're looking at on the results. They don't understand that they're probably going to end up testifying in court one way or the other. With, if you didn't find anything, why? It's the only time I really like to see radar used is when it's on a surface that you can't penetrate, such as asphalt, concrete, and there are some other things, but I'm very shy about using radar.
Okay. I was going to ask you about when you're approached, and again, I think you had, I think I read somewhere that, over the years you've had, hundreds of cases as a group, as NecroSearch has been working on. What kind of ratio do you have? Because I imagine some of these have got to be really difficult, or, it's based on a hunch, or, right? So, yeah, so there's probably a lot of searches that you do that they're cold. They don't turn up anything, right?
Right. And, being asked on the stand, well, how many investigations NecroSearch done? 400 and something. Well, how many have been successful? Well, let's define success. We're looking for human remains. If we bring 10 disciplines, dogs, botanists, all geophysics, geology, soils, into an area that we've determined is within the search footprint, and we don't find anything, going to say we're about 80% certain that we've been successful and that there's nothing there. That at least what they're looking for. Have we found human remains? Absolutely. Difficult cases, just like the one I told, the one in the Missouri River, the one under the concrete. Some very tricky cases. But I've also chased a grave. He's moved it 3 times. That should be illegal right there. You just don't go and dig up something because, these people are coming to look for it. So it's, again, we find our disturbances and, try to prioritize them. A lot of people will get into, a disturbance and then really trying to read, their bones. I can't do that.
Yeah.
But yes, we have, I would say out of 400 searches, we're probably in the range of 15% of actually finding human remains. But I can also say that the other 85% pretty sure has been cleared.
Which is helpful in itself, because if you know that there's likely nothing there, you can focus your attention on something else. You can exclude that area from being important, and you go move on to the next location, right? So yeah, it's still helpful. So it's not that you didn't find anything. It could be that there's nothing there. So yeah, that's a really good point. You talked about testifying at trial in court. So I'm curious about what kinds of things you're being asked by. I mean, if you're working for law enforcement, that means you're going to be cross-examined by the defense. And so what kinds of things do they tend to ask you? Like, what are they curious about? Or
Well, I'm very of course the first thing is credibility. You'll get questions like, now, Dr. Davenport, could you, excuse me, I see you're not a doctor. Mr. Davenport. And of course, that goes on every fifth question. Now, doctor, I'm sorry, it's Mr. That's the credibility issue. But when I've testified, I've had defense attorneys that haven't asked anything. That's happened once. But I've also had defense attorneys that have done a bit of research and asked some pretty good questions. And scientists and engineers are not good people trying to explain something to a layman. They're very condescending, and I take great pride in being able to explain to judges. In fact, on that ground penetrating radar case, we went with a Daubert decision, and I had to educate the judge as to whether the radar could be entered. The results of the radar could be used in court as evidence, and it's you deal with juries, but defense can ask some very good questions, which you take. I always count to three or four before I answer a question, because it's just, if you do that enough, it looks normal and it gives me time to think about, okay, how am I going to explain this?
Hmm.
But I enjoy it. Court is theater, and I've had dinner with a defense attorney, a fairly well known one in the mid United States, and I asked him, "Hey, you ever defended somebody that you know is guilty?" He said, "Oh, absolutely." I said, "How can you do that?" He said, "My job is to protect their rights." And once I understood that, it made sense.
Right,
I've
right. Yeah.
also one of our investigations, and it's probably the most important one I ever did, was finding a truck in the Columbia River. And because of the timeline and the victim, the driver of the vehicle, who was out on parole, there was a crime committed very close to where he was living at the time that had the same MO as the one he was in prison for. But because of the timeline and other information, he could not have committed the crime that they were thinking that he did. He was innocent. And at that point, you realize this is science. These are facts. You can't change the facts.
Right, right. Yeah, there's somebody I know, he says never argue with the facts. That's for sure.
Right.
So are you typically sending one person from NecroSearch to testify, or do you have to get multiple people sometimes on the stand?
It depends. We had I would say usually it's two people that would end up testifying on the same crime, but it depends on, what was done and what the agency, or at that point the district attorney, feels is necessary.
Okay. I noticed that there was a book that was written a long time, and I believe that was Steve Jackson
Mm-hmm.
some time ago, and I think it's a little dated right now, but
It
I
is
don't know if
David.
okay. Is he still around? Is Steve still
Oh,
around, or?
Steve is alive. He's undergoing cancer treatment, and he's thinking of, actually, he's actively working on another book about NecroSearch with
Oh, okay.
more modern cases. His first book was called No Stone Unturned, and I think it's available in paperback on eBay. It was a fun read. Number of the cases we worked on, a bit about forensic science. Steve's a character. He been with him on our case in Russia. We've had 3 or 4 different NecroSearch people on that one, and Steve's been there a couple of times.
What's his background, or what's his specialty?
History. He's working on the history. He's a writer, an author,
Okay.
and he's written a number of books, and mostly true crime. So he's our historian, but he also, when we need groundwork in Russia, we're in some pretty tough terrain, and he's in there with another set of eyes.
I want to ask you about some of the cases. I mean, you've sort of, led into a few of them, but were there any in particular, or even if it was one you mentioned already, that was really memorable, or something that really stood out in your mind? It was either because it was a good learning experience for you, or it just had a big impact?
Well, the main one was the one I just explained about the vehicle in the Columbia River, the driver. That had a big impact on me, and I realized that there are two sides to every story, and I do have a degree in criminal justice, but I also have a 4-year, let's say, degree, a certificate in preparing to be a deacon in the Episcopal Church, 4 years of seminary. So I get to see a number of different things. Sometimes my mind just gets really wobbly. It's like shaking a tree full of hoot owls. But the other case, I love history. I'm just a real history buff, and being invited to work on the looking for the remains of Michael Romanov, who may have been the last czar of Russia. Doing this with a friend who runs another nonprofit called the Search Foundation, and we've been working summers for 2 to 3 weeks for oh God, 8 years or more. Didn't go this year. Don't want to end up well, anyways. Uh, it's been quite an experience. I enjoy the area we're working in Russia. It's almost in Siberia, to the foot of the Urals. I enjoy the people we're working with. We're working with Russian police. We're working with historians and archaeologists. Uh, People that work with their hands are real people, not politicians. So
Yeah, right.
stay away from
If you mind, I'm going to take a question here. Somebody just asked in the comments here, and this is from. Well, it says Polaris 30,000, but it's actually, I believe, it's Connor from Calgary, but he's watching from Texas. So,
poor guy.
yeah. So
I,
he says,
I tell people I lived in Texas for a year, and then I went to Vietnam. It was a step up in living.
"Oh boy, people from Texas are going to go nuts now." So,
I love it. I love them.
he
That was
says
Houston.
here,
Anyways,
for
go ahead.
personal interest, it's also possible to identify potential grave sites, scattered remains, and possible further sites using models developed from historical geological data. So basically, is it possible to identify these sites and scattered remains using some kind of historical data? I mean, do you? Well, you mentioned something about the images and subtracting images.
Right. We do
so
that. We also look at LiDAR for elevation changes and rotating a three-dimensional model. It's called geomorphology, looking at the surface of the Earth, and you can rotate it and look at shadows. To me, shadows, one of the things I use are polarized shooting glasses. And you can get them, or polarized sunglasses if you wish. You can get them for $15. I use purple ones if it's cloudy, and I use amber ones, amber lenses if it's not. And the differences you can see with those things, looking at a site, you can see where people have walked, where vehicles have been, that you probably can't see if you don't have them on. Polarized lens glasses are incredible. So that gets into the surface of the ground. Modeling geology, not so much. We're not really into the geology. What we use a geologist for is looking at the ground and saying, hey, wait a minute, this over here is this type of soil, but right here I've got a pile of this type of soil. These are more soils people. Geology can play a role. We've done a number of things with mine shafts. Colorado's a great place to dump a body in a mine shaft, and that gets into some geology. Yeah.
okay. How do you keep? I mean, you have a lot of players that are on your team or people that have signed up. You said you got like 50 people or something like that. So how do you keep everybody on the same page? How do you keep training and like people updated on each other's level of expertise or new things like that? What kinds of things do you do just to keep everybody updated?
Right. We have our monthly meeting, and we talk not only about cases, but we have what we call NecroSearch family discussions of who's maybe given a paper, given a talk, taken training. We just last meeting was a training with AEDs. We bought a couple of AEDs to take out the field. One of them take out when we go to the field, or two of them. Two different investigations.
What's an AED? Sorry, what's an AED?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a automatic. It's a defibrillator. You put two pads on and shock somebody. Yeah, these are all what I call TLAs, three-letter acronyms. I hate them.
Too many.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we share with each other. What's going on not only in our lives, but professional lives and family lives. We just had one of our incredible members who specialized in landfills, put their bodies in landfills, just passed away 3 weeks ago. And that has been a huge, huge loss. Although we have another person that he has trained. But we train each other, we cross-train, and say we go out and do work, maybe on a cemetery running radar. We make sure everybody gets a chance to run the radar. You're not going to be an expert in it, but you will know how to organize it and what needs to be done prior.
I've noticed here on the website you've got this is part of the area, the same area where you do the training,
Yes,
like
it
where you
is.
do hands-on.
In
Okay.
fact, we're self-funded. And right now, starting Friday, every year we give a course, a hands-on course for law enforcement and only law enforcement, or certified forensic scientists. We talk about each of the methods we use, and then we go out and apply them, looking for our pigs that have been buried, and we excavate it. It's a hands-on course. We try to keep the cost uh, reasonable. Uh, and I think last year we had a couple of scholarships. We've had people from God knows all over. Even I think we had someone from Africa came over. That's how we don't spend a lot of money unless we're buying equipment. We do get obviously donations, but this is a prime method of raising funds.
But this is primary, and this is also like the training is primarily for the NecroSearch people. But can you, like, if somebody wanted to attend, like other people can attend?
No,
No.
it's basically for our own people, new we get students in and stuff that are going to join or have joined NecroSearch. To join NecroSearch is a year-long process, but the training class is specifically for law enforcement individuals. We have people coming in from the BIA in fact, starting Friday, I'll be giving a couple of talks, but we all are different people, not all of them, but give talks on different disciplines. And then you go out and you look at the vegetation. You talk about the geology of the soils out there. You look for the animal tracks that scavenge. So it's a hands-on thing. You're not going to be an expert. You won't be a member of NecroSearch, but at least you'll understand some things that you can do on your own to help yourself on an investigation.
Right. Hey, so tell me about what you're working on. Is there something that you have plans for looking forward that you'd like to do with NecroSearch, or even personally, for that matter, with some of the jobs and some of the cases you've been working on?
I am particularly well. I've said one of my dreams is to look for the remains of some of uh, uh, Hannibal's, not Hannibal Lecter, Hannibal, the 27-year-old general that crossed the Alps with God knows how many people and 7 or 8 elephants. And everybody says there's no archaeological record. There is, but I've flown over the Alps a couple of times, and that dream has been shattered. I know there's some French people working on it, and they're doing a good job. No, I love history. Um, I'm very interested in also in mass graves. Uh, Trying to help people find those. And there's some different techniques that can be used. I was approached a number of years ago by someone from the UN. They said, "Oh yeah, we have a grave where mass grave where people were buried in 55-gallon or metal drums, but we didn't have a magnetometer." I said, "Well, did you have a compass?" They said, "Oh yeah, we had a compass." I said, "You have what you need to find those things," and it's just sharing that is my passion now. I mean, I have new knees that help in the field, but I'm not young. I'm not as young as I used to be. The passion's
Yeah.
still there.
I mean, you like history, so I mean, have you ever
I
been
love.
involved in anything regarding, World War II and like recovering some of the bodies or people, overseas or anything like that?
No, we have 2 members of NecroSearch that are actively involved in overseas looking for missing the MIAs from World War II. I don't know if they don't get into Vietnam. Um, and I worked on a B-24 crash that happened during the Second World War, but happened here in Colorado. We found the remains, and the Air Force put up a plaque. Actually, it's interesting. We lost more people, more pilots in training in the U.S. than we did in the war itself, overseas in combat. I've also volunteered finding a mass grave from the Fanshawe expedition, which was it's called no, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a a massacre that took place in Utah involving Indians, the Mormons, and a wagon train. Not Meadow Massacre, that was the name of it. I've worked up at Fort Laramie as a volunteer doing radar. And yeah, just this history stuff. I just love it. And if I have the time and I don't do that through NecroSearch. I do it again just as myself. But it's good training.
Yeah, excellent. Do you mind if I put your LinkedIn profile up here? Because in case somebody wants to get a hold of you, I know that sometimes it comes up, and I am going to show this here. You are, and we're connected here on LinkedIn. But if anyone is interested in reaching out, if you want to find out more about forensic geophysics, if you want to find out about history, or if you want to find out about NecroSearch, Clark is, I guess you could reach out to him on the on LinkedIn platform. But I don't know if, and also NecroSearch, I want to bring that up in case if there's any people from law enforcement that have an interest in reaching out to you guys for help, right? There's a contact form. So let me bring up the banner as well, because that might be interesting. So just necrosearch.org. Okay. And the contact form, does that come to you or does that come to some other people?
No, it doesn't come to me. It comes to the president. My personal email is one word, geoforensics, plural, geoforensics @comcast.net. And if people want to contact me, that's fine. Just in the subject, just put NecroSearch or something along those lines, forensic or question on forensics. I do Excellent. A lot of.
All right. Well, Clark, I don't know. You're cutting out there. I don't know if that's a sign or something, but now I don't hear you.
Oh,
now I do. You like that mute button? Yeah.
You know, people ask if NecroSearch uses psychics, and I say no because I understand law enforcement does, but when we call them, they say who's calling, and that's a clue right there that we're not going to use it.
All right. Well, look, I really appreciate your time and answering some questions and talking to us about the being a geophysicist and also some of the work that you're doing at NecroSearch. Yeah, look, hang back here for a second. I'm just going to make some closing remarks, but yeah, really appreciate your time.
It's wonderful. And everybody out there, if I can help you or we can help you in any way, please keep us in mind. All
right. Hang tight. We'll be right back. All right, folks, that does it for this one. Another one, NecroSearch. Never know. If you are in need of some help, it sounds like they have a vast network of people with all kinds of different disciplines and expertise. So you can always contact them, and if you're a law enforcement agency, and maybe get some help in some areas that you didn't have access to before. So that does it for this one, folks. Thank you very much. Have a happy Thursday, and we are going to see you soon. So take care. Bye-bye.